Hey, what's going on? Kevin Yates here, and I want to welcome you to my channel where I empower women who are in relationships with men who are distant, disconnected, and disengaged to reconnect, rebuild, and reignite their relationships so they can take their power back, take charge in their relationships, and take control of their lives. So today I want to talk to you about how to get your man to change. You know, if you've been struggling with issues in your relationship that are going on, where, you know, he says he'll do one thing, he says he'll work on these issues, but he's doing another, right? Or he's never following through. He doesn't keep his word to you. He, maybe he's just not taking his share of the responsibility in the relationship. He's kind of pushing it all on you, and you're taking all of that relationship on. You're taking all the responsibility. You're doing everything, taking care of him, taking care of the kids if you have kids. You're giving your all into this relationship. You're the one trying to work on these issues, and he's just not there. He's distant. He's just kind of isolated. He's kind of doing his own thing, and it's really just kind of to the point where you're worried that your relationship is starting to fall apart. So if you're wondering, how do I get him to change? Maybe he's got some bad habits. Maybe he's doing some things, and you've been trying, and you just are kind of banging your head against the wall, trying to figure out, what can I do? Because no matter what I'm trying to do, it's not working. So that's what I'm going to share with you today. So real quick, before we get started, if you haven't done so, go ahead and click the like and subscribe buttons down below. And that way, when I post new videos, you'll be notified and you can check them out. And if you haven't done so already, I created a free video series. And, if you're struggling with how to talk to your man, how to get him to work with you to fix the problems in your relationship, and to be able to not only do that, but to do it without fighting. So if you are struggling to do that, go ahead and click the link in the description box below, and I have a free video series where I will share with you exactly how you can do that. So let's get started with today's video, how to get your man to change. If you've been struggling to get your man to change, and you're wondering why is it that he's not changing, the reason why is because you're allowing it. Okay, I mean, he's not going to change his ways when you've been allowing him to get away with what he's been doing this whole time. Now, bear with me before you click this off and cuss me out for this. I'm not saying that you're to blame. Okay, so I'm not blaming you here. I'm not judging you. I'm not saying that any of this is your fault. It's nothing to do with that. It's just that you've allowed him to do what he's doing. If we don't stop the pattern, if we don't interrupt the pattern, then he has no reason to change. He's just going to keep doing what he's been doing. Now, that's kind of the key, right? Is how do we interrupt the pattern? And really the key to doing that comes from increasing your awareness. So awareness it's the prerequisite for change, is what I always say, because if we're not aware of not only what the problems are, but how we're creating them, right? How are we creating them? What is our part in this whole thing? If we're not aware of that, then we cannot change, right? We can't change anything that we're not aware of. So awareness is the fundamental kind of prerequisite for change. So we have to have that. And here's the thing, with a relationship, as much as he might be doing so much shit that is, basically ruining the relationship, he's not doing his part. He's maybe blaming you for the problems that are going on, or he's telling you that you need to get over it and all this other crap that he's putting you through. Still, there is a part that you're playing, and this is the toughest thing, because most of the time we want to look at him, right? You're probably wanting to look at him because you're saying, wait a minute here, I didn't bring any of this on. He's the one that's not working, not helping me work on these issues. He's the one that's pushing his responsibility off on me. He's the one who's isolating himself. He's the one, on and on and on, right? But still, a relationship still is at least 50% your responsibility. Now, again, I'm not blaming you for any of this. I'm not saying you deserve it. I'm not making a judgment on you at all. All I'm saying is that there's 50% of the responsibility in the relationship is in your hands. So all this is about is taking ownership of your 50%, right? We can't force him to change. We can't make him do anything. But what we can do is we can be accountable and responsible for our own 50% of the relationship. And if we're willing to change that, and we start changing that part of us, because that 50% has a part in the creation of what's happening in the relationship, whether that's good or bad. And I know, you might not like to hear that, but it's the truth, right? We're all responsible here in the relationship. There's two people here, and both people are responsible for what's happening at some level, okay? So again, this is not a blame on you. This is not saying you're at fault. This is not a judgment on you. It's just me saying that this 50% of this relationship is in your hands. It's your responsibility. So at this point, this is about now, again, taking responsibility and taking ownership for your 50%, not his, but yours, okay? And that means that it's time now to stand up, step up, and speak up for yourself. Even though you've probably tried that a million times, and every time you do, it pisses him off, you try to bring up the problems in your relationship to get him to work with you, and it sets him off. He gets upset. It ends up in a big argument. He's pissed off for days, or he leaves, or whatever. But that doesn't mean that you need to keep it all in and be afraid to bring it up because it's going to piss him off. It's got to be brought up, but you've got to get to the point now where you're going to stand up, step up, and speak up for yourself, regardless of how much it's going to piss him off, right? And so this has to do now with how do we do that, right? How do you do that? How do you step up, stand up, speak up for yourself? Well, it's not just like you get up and you let him have it and you tell him all the reasons you're pissed off at him and you tell him what he needs to do and how he needs to change and he needs to stop doing this and start doing that, because all that's going to do is it's going to bring up his defenses. Yes, it's going to piss him off. And then he's going to close down and he's going to dig his heels in and snap back at you, or he's going to leave, depending on, who your man is, how he is. He might tell you, I don't want to talk about this, or I'm done with this, or he might leave and slam the damn door, right? So it's really about communicating your boundaries, right? So, having boundaries it's just about being clear about what it is that you are willing to accept and tolerate in your relationship and what you're not willing to accept and tolerate in your relationship. Now, this might be something that you never really thought about, right? Or and if you have, you've maybe never communicated it to him. And if you tried, it's just been in a way that he doesn't get it, right? He doesn't understand. So it's time to really set those boundaries, make sure you're clear on what your boundaries are, and communicate those boundaries to him so that he gets it. So then once we have the boundaries, now boundaries are kind of like one part of it, right? So even if you've communicated this to him, and if you have, great, perfect, you're one step ahead of the game. But here's what happens a lot of times. We communicate boundaries, but we don't have any outcomes. So the outcome is saying, okay, if you violate these boundaries of mine, then this is what's going to happen. He might not understand what those outcomes are because you've never really laid it out to him before, right? And maybe, you've done that because you've been afraid to tell him that because you don't want to upset him. You don't want to fight with him anymore. So you kind of keep it all in. But then what good is that doing you? Because as much as you try to keep it in, you try to ignore, deny, repress how you feel, you try to disown these feelings, you think you're just going to move beyond it and you'll get over it. But honestly, those feelings, they're doing push-ups inside you all the time. They're getting stronger. They never really go away. And so the longer you keep it all in, you suffer in silence with it until you can't take it anymore and you become more and more unhappy. right? You become angry, you resent him, you start becoming bitter. You guys start snapping and fighting over the silliest things sometimes, right? And it comes out of nowhere. Maybe you just blow up over something little. So, that's kind of the stuff that happens. So we've really got to get clear on communicating the boundaries that you have, and then also making it clear what the outcomes are. If you violate these boundaries of mine, this is what is going to happen. So if you don't follow through on the outcomes that you've communicated to him, if you don't follow through, what reason does he have to change? Right? None. Zero. And he won't. So he'll continue to run the pattern, right? The habit that he's in. There's a reason why habits are hard to break, right? So again, in order to break a habit, part of it is you got to step in and interrupt this pattern that he's stuck in. And kind of it's like a wake-up call to him. So that's it. Those are 3 simple but powerful things that you can do to get your husband or your boyfriend to start to change and, to help you out in resolving the problems that you're having in your relationship, because, if we don't work on these things, if we're not communicating and getting these things out in the open and also working on them, that's how relationships grow, right? Relationships are never stagnant, and when they become stagnant, like we stay stuck with the same issues all the time, they don't grow. And if they don't grow, then the relationship starts to die. So instead of growing together, we fall apart. And that's where relationships get in a lot of trouble. People stay in unhappy relationships or they end them, but a lot of times they stay stuck in them. They are unhappy, they're angry, resentful, they're bitter, and it's really just no way to live, right? The ultimate goal, I think, that we all want ultimately is happiness. We want to be happy, right? But we've got to do some work to keep the relationships that we're in growing. And sometimes some of that work is a little uncomfortable, right? But, that's how relationships are. Nothing's perfect. Nothing is just, happy-go-lucky all the time, right? We've got to be willing to roll up our sleeves, to dig in and do some of the work so that we can grow our relationships and achieve the ultimate goal that we have, which is really just to be happy in our relationships. So that's all I've got for today. I hope that this helped you. If you have any questions or comments, go ahead and type them in down below. And until next time, have faith, follow your heart, and trust yourself. Talk to you soon.